Hello. Okay, Abigail, directed by a Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, or also known as Radio Silence. They directed the previous two Scream movies. I quite liked Scream 5, not a massive fan of Scream 6, but I was looking forward to this movie, and I just liked the premise, I liked the idea, it looks fun, I love a good vampire movie, but what I will say, and what I feel like I've got to say, is I'm not a big fan of how they promoted this movie when it comes to the trailers. I really do think they should have kept sort of the fact that this little girl is a vampire, I feel like should have been kept in sort of mystery. It should have had this shroud of mystery around it. You know, I just feel like it would have been more effective if they'd kept that aspect of the story a secret until watching the film for the first time. You know, just promote the film, advertise it as being this movie about a group of people that kidnap this little girl of a wealthy individual, and then shit just starts going down, you know what I mean? Shit starts to hit the fan. We don't know what it is, but something is picking off these people, and just have kept it like that. And then when we got the film, we would have had the reveal, the surprise that actually this little girl is the vampire. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I understand why they've done it. I understand the studios need to get asses in the seats. But just a minor gripe from me that I just really needed to get off my chest. But anyway, rant over, enough rambling. What did I think of Abigail? So, the movie does start off a little bit clunky. It has got a bit of a slow start to it. A lot of the sort of the first act is us being introduced to these characters that kidnapped this little girl. And I did appreciate the attempt at sort of the character development and sort of, you know, getting us to understand and know who these characters are. But the way in which it's done, I just felt was a little bit awkward and just not quite as natural as I perhaps would have liked it to have been. It didn't quite feel as organic or as natural. And sort of, it felt just a little bit too intentional. You kind of knew, you could kind of see what it was they were doing in the writing process and what it was they really wanted to achieve within these moments. It was perhaps a little bit too obvious. Maybe that's the better word to use. But I did appreciate that attempt at giving us characters that we could perhaps connect to on some emotional level. And so just to sort of understand and know and be able to sort of get emotionally involved with these characters. The attempt is there. It just didn't quite work for me. For example, you'd have a lot of these little moments in the first act. They would be sort of there to set up certain moments later on in the movie that was designed to have some sort of emotional impact, for example. Like the sort of the pinky promise. I'm going to use that as an example. And it just didn't work. Like I said, the intention, you could see what the intentions was, but it was just a little bit too awkward in how it was done. And for example, the payoff when you get into that third act and sort of all those character moments that you sort of had with the first act, they just didn't quite work when it came to that third act in sort of the payoff and what they were designed to do. But again, I appreciated the attempt. And when it comes to the humour within this movie, it just didn't quite work for me. There's a certain style or tone of humour that is used, and it was just a little bit too silly and childish and just didn't quite fit into sort of this overall kind of, you know, the horror aspect of what this experience is. It's very well balanced. Like, I feel like the amount of humour that we've got within here was very well balanced, and it was the right amount, but I just don't feel like the style of humour worked for the type of film that they were attempting to make. I think they did a really good job with the horror elements when it comes to this little girl playing the vampire, and I really liked a lot of those moments with the carnage and the vampire doing her thing and all of that. They were fantastic, but the humour within all of this just really stood out to me. It just didn't work, and I just don't find it funny. It's that kind of humour where it's like, you know, the only way I can describe it is it's like, oh, look at me, I'm being funny. Or look what I just said. Isn't that funny? And I hate it. I can't stand it. And so yeah, it just didn't quite work. Don't get me wrong, there was the odd moment that kind of made me chuckle, but overall, it just didn't quite fit into the overall experience. And yeah, so the humour just didn't quite fit seamlessly into this entire experience. And the other aspect that just didn't quite work for me was the editing as well within this movie. The way in which they would edit certain moments, especially with this little girl as the vampire and she's taunting her prey and all of that. I just feel like it was very choppy, and they would cut these scenes in certain places that would kind of take away from sort of the momentum of that moment. And they ended up becoming a little bit awkward and sort of jarring in just the way in which certain moments would play out. They're very fun, and you know, these moments are a lot of fun, and I did enjoy these moments, but I just felt like the editing in a lot of these moments just could have perhaps been a little bit more seamless, and just add, you know, let us sort of soak in what it is that's going on in front of us. And when it comes to the characters and the performances from the cast, I feel like almost everyone was pretty good here. I mean, Dan Stevens, I couldn't stand his performance in Godzilla x Kong. I mean, his performance and his character in that movie really grated on me. But yeah, I kind of really liked what he was doing with the character. The standout performance for me is by Alisha Weir, who plays Abigail, this little ballerina vampire. And she's absolutely amazing in this movie. She is fantastic. There's this one particular moment with her character, and she's been threatened by a gun by Dan Stevens' character. And she kind of really sort of sells the sort of the fear of what this character is going through in that moment by having this gun by her head. And it felt very natural, and it's like, for a moment, like, you know, just by watching the trailers who this little girl is, but in that one moment, due to her performance, she elevates the tension within that moment, but also sells the fear that this character is going through. And I was like, fuck, she's really good. But there is one performance that just didn't quite work for me, and it's a pivotal character that plays a pivotal role within the story, and that is Joey, played by Melissa Barrera, who she was also the lead actress in the previous two Scream movies, directed by the same duo, Radio Silence. And her performance didn't work in Scream for me, and it's the same year. It just doesn't work. The only way I can sort of describe it is it just didn't quite feel natural. It just feels like her character is there and she's sort of saying these lines that she needs to say to sort of allow the story to sort of move along. Sort of going back to how I felt really with a lot of those character moments, and how sort of that attempt at character development is there. It's that kind of same sort of feeling when it comes to her performance. Like, the only way I can describe it is disconnected. Her performance for me feels very disconnected. She's there, she's existing, she's doing what she needs to do, but that's about it. There's just something very kind of, I don't want to use the word wooden, but it's close. And just like the kind of the clunky, slow start to the movie, the third act does get quite messy in sort of when it comes to revealing a lot of the sort of the twists and just sort of how the story plays out. It perhaps plays out a little bit too long in certain moments, especially sort of the final confrontation between certain characters. That's all I'll say, as I want to sort of keep this as spoiler-free as possible. But I had a hell of a lot of fun with this movie. Now, from sort of the criticisms that I've given, my personal sort of thoughts on this movie, it might sound like I hated this film. I really didn't. I actually quite enjoyed this movie a lot. I liked what it was they were doing. There are elements that just didn't work for me, like the humour just really didn't work, but I really appreciated the attempt at sort of giving us character. But I had a hell of a lot of fun. Like, when it comes to the horror elements and sort of the violence and the gore and sort of the carnage, when it comes to this sort of little vampire ballerina kid, I just thought was fucking brilliant. Like, it was a lot of fun. I was enjoying myself and I was entertained. It's bloody, it's gory, it's sort of, for me personally, it was up there with that sort of the original Blade movie when it comes to the amount of gore that's on the screen and the violence. And I appreciated the amount of practical that was used as well within the movie. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of CGI, but there was practical here as well. And there are a lot of moments within this movie that I just really liked. Like, this is one random moment with Abigail controlling her prey. That's all I'm gonna say. And you sort of, you focus it on this moment for a bit, for a lot longer than I expected to, and I had a lot of fun with this moment. I enjoyed it, and the overall experience has this kind of very 80s comedy horror vibe or atmosphere to it that I really liked. It's almost like a love letter really to those kind of movies. And I like that. But it just can't help but fall, even though it's trying to be this kind of something that's, different and unique and have its own flavour, still sort of somewhat falls into that kind of like, we've seen this before. I predicted a lot of these moments that that's set up within the first act and sort of how they would play out in the third act. There was a lot of kind of knowing what to expect with this movie. And yet, at the same time, you would get that sort of odd random moment that's thrown at you, like with Abigail controlling her prey. And it was like, whoa, this is different. I like this. And so, yeah, it's not a consistent experience for me when it comes to sort of how I felt towards it. But I cannot deny overall, I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it. Apart from that kind of clanky, slow start, the film does a good job at just sort of throwing you into sort of the carnage and the chaos, and I'm kind of there, and I was having a good time. So yeah, they're my thoughts on Abigail. It might sort of come across as if I've hated this film, just down to the way in which I've rambled on about it negatively, but I really didn't. I had a good time with this movie. I was entertained. I enjoyed it. It's a solid little vampire film. Yes, there's a couple of things they could have done, sort of dialed down and sort of adjusted the tone when it comes to humour and sort of the writing in moments and sort of performances maybe. And yes, there are minor adjustments that could have been made. But overall, I was entertained. Like this is also this kind of campness running throughout the movie that I really liked. But again, just down to the way in which a majority of the humour plays out, it just didn't quite work for the type of movie that I felt like they were trying to make. And I just felt like if they'd adjusted that humour a little bit and sort of brought it in and toned it down and maybe have given us something perhaps a little bit darker and edgier when it comes to the humour, and just perhaps something that was not so in your face, then maybe it would have worked even better for me. But at what I got, I appreciated what it was they were doing. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. And for me, Abigail is a solid 7 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Abigail, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek ramble on, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next video will be my review of the latest Joker Folie à Deux, the trailer for the Joker sequel. That is a little bit delayed, but that will definitely be my next video. I'm looking forward to sharing with you all my thoughts on the teaser for the sequel to Joker. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.